Sunday evenings always carried a heavy weight in my chest. That familiar knot formed in my stomach as I waited for Jake to come home from his weekend with Sarah and her boyfriend Derek. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, and these handoffs still felt like emotional battlefields. I was standing at my kitchen window watching the driveway when Derek's silver BMW pulled up at exactly 6 o'clock. Jake climbed out of the back seat, his small shoulders hunched forward, dragging his Pokemon backpack behind him. Something about his posture screamed exhaustion. Derek didn't even get out of the car. Sarah gave Jake a quick wave from the passenger seat before they drove away. My son walked through the front door and immediately wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face against my shirt. Then he whispered the words that made my blood turn to ice. "Dad, they ate at a restaurant while I waited in the car for 2 hours." Jake's voice was barely audible, muffled against my work shirt. His small hands gripped the fabric tightly, like he was afraid I might disappear. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. 2 hours, in a car, alone. My 8-year-old son. I knelt down to his eye level, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, buddy? Can you tell me exactly what happened?" Jake's brown eyes, so much like mine, were rimmed with exhaustion. "We went to this fancy place with white tablecloths. Mom said it was grown-up time only. Derek locked the car doors and told me to be good. I had to pee really bad, but I couldn't get out. I was so hungry, Dad. My stomach kept making noises. The protective rage that surged through me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not even during the worst fights with Sarah during our marriage. This was different. This was about my child's safety, his dignity, his basic human needs being ignored by the 2 adults responsible for caring for him." I forced myself to take 3 deep breaths before speaking. "Jake, I need you to go wash your hands and get ready for dinner." "Can you do that for me?" He nodded and trudged toward the bathroom. The moment I heard the water running, I grabbed my truck keys from the hook by the door. My hands were shaking with fury as I drove the 12 blocks to Sarah's rental house in the Maple Grove subdivision. Derek's BMW sat in the driveway next to Sarah's white Honda. Every light in the house was on. I still had the emergency key Sarah had given me months ago, back when we were trying to make this co-parenting thing work smoothly. I slipped it into the lock and walked straight through the front door without knocking. Sarah and Derek were sprawled on her cream-colored sectional sofa, each holding a glass of red wine. The coffee table was littered with takeout containers from Romano's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown. They were laughing about something Derek was showing her on his phone. "Having a nice evening?" I asked, my voice cutting through their laughter like a knife. Sarah jumped, nearly spilling her wine. "Marty, what are you doing here? You can't just walk into my house." Derek set down his wine glass with deliberate slowness, his gray eyes narrowing. He was one of those guys who clearly spent more time at the gym than necessary, all biceps and attitude. "Yeah, buddy. This is private property. Maybe you should learn some boundaries." The condescending tone in his voice made my jaw clench. "Boundaries. You want to talk about boundaries? How about the boundary that says you don't abandon a child in a parking lot for 2 hours while you enjoy a romantic dinner?" Sarah's face flushed pink. "Jake is being dramatic. He was perfectly fine. The car was locked and safe." "Fine." I stepped closer to the couch. "Sarah, he's 8 years old. He needed to use the bathroom. He was hungry. He was scared and alone while you 2 played house." Derek stood up, puffing out his chest like some kind of peacock. "Look, Marty, right kids need to learn patience. The world doesn't revolve around them. Sarah and I deserve to have adult time without some kid whining every 5 minutes. The casual cruelty in his words made my vision blur with anger. Adult time. At the expense of a child's basic needs, Sarah set her wine down and crossed her arms. Don't lecture me about parenting Marty. Jake needs to understand that he's not the center of the universe anymore. Derek and I are building something together, and Jake has to learn to adapt. Adapt. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Sarah, what has happened to you? Since when do you put some guy you've known for 4 months ahead of your own son? That's when Derek pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his photos with a smug grin. Oh, this isn't the first time, buddy. We've been working on teaching Jake some independence for a while now. He turned his phone screen toward me, and my stomach dropped. Photo after photo of expensive meals, lobster thermidor at captain's table, filet mignon at the Sterling Club, sushi platters at Osaka House. Each photo was time-stamped and geotagged, creating a digital record of their dining adventures. See, 3 months of beautiful dinners. Just the two of us. Jake's getting much better at waiting quietly. Last week, he only cried for the first 30 minutes. The timestamp on the most recent photo showed tonight's dinner lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. My son had been locked in a car alone for over 2 hours, while these two selfish adults gorged themselves on $60 entrees. Sarah actually looked proud as she nodded. Derek's teaching me that I need to prioritize my happiness too. I spent too many years putting Jake first, and look where it got me. Divorced and miserable, putting Jake first. I stared at her in disbelief. Sarah, he's your child. He's supposed to come first. That's what being a parent means. Derek actually laughed, and took another sip of his wine. That's old school thinking, man. Modern parenting is about balance. Kids need to learn that adults have needs too. Tough love builds character. I wanted to grab Derek by his expensive polo shirt and shake him until his teeth rattled. Instead, I pulled out my own phone. Sarah, I'm calling my lawyer first thing tomorrow morning. This ends now. Sarah's face went pale. Marty, don't be ridiculous. Jake is fine. You're overreacting like you always do. Overreacting. I kept my voice deadly calm. Where is Jake's overnight bag? I want to see what he brought with him this weekend. It's upstairs, Sarah said hesitantly. But I don't see why that matters. Get it now. Derek rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath about helicopter parenting. But Sarah disappeared upstairs. She returned a few minutes later with Jake's small blue duffel bag and his Pokemon backpack. I unzipped the backpack first, expecting to find the usual collection of toy cars and comic books. Instead, my hands closed around a small composition notebook with a dinosaur sticker on the front. Jake's second-grade handwriting filled page after page in careful pencil marks. What is this? I opened to the first entry dated 3 months ago. March 15th. Mom and Derek went to a fish place. I waited in the car for 1 hour and 23 minutes. I counted on my watch. A police car drove by and I got scared they would think I was lost. I pretended to be asleep when they looked at me. My hands started trembling as I read the next entry. March 22nd. They went to a place with a big cow statue outside. 1 hour and 55 minutes. I had to pee so bad, but Derek said if I got out of the car, he would never take me anywhere again. I had an accident. Mom was mad about the car seat. Sarah tried to grab the notebook from my hands. Give me that Jake had no right to write down private family business. I held the notebook away from her and kept reading. Each entry was more heartbreaking than the last. Jake had been meticulously documenting every incident, recording times, locations, and his feelings. One entry from 6 weeks ago made my throat close up. April 20th. They went to the fancy place with the big windows. 2 hours and 8 minutes. I watched a dad teaching his little boy to ride a bike in the parking lot. The boy kept falling down, but the dad kept helping him up. They looked so happy together. I cried because I miss when Dad used to teach me things. I wonder if I'm the reason Mom and Dad got divorced. Maybe if I was better, Mom would want to spend time with me too. Oh, Jake. I whispered, my heart breaking into a million pieces. I dug deeper into his backpack and found something that made my rage surge even higher. Hidden in the bottom pocket were 6 individually wrapped saltine crackers, the kind they serve with soup at school lunch. Jake had been hoarding food-saving crackers from his school meals to eat during these long waits. Derek leaned over to see what I was holding. When he saw the crackers, he actually sneered. Pathetic. Kid needs to toughen up. Life's not going to hand him everything on a silver platter. He's 8 years old, you heartless piece of garbage, I snarled. Sarah snatched the crackers from my hand and stared at them with growing horror. For the first time that evening, she seemed to grasp the reality of what had been happening. Jake was saving these. I flipped to the last entry in the notebook dated yesterday. Jake's handwriting was shakier here, like he'd been crying while he wrote. I've been thinking about running away. Maybe if I disappear, Mom will be happier with Derek. Dad always says I should tell him if I'm sad, but I don't want to make him worry. Adults already have too many problems. Maybe I'm the problem. If I wasn't here, maybe Mom and Dad would get back together and everyone would be happy again. I saw a movie where a kid runs away and lives in the woods. I think I could do that. I'm brave enough. The notebook slipped from my numb fingers and hit the floor. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Even Derek looked uncomfortable for the first time that evening. He wants to run away, Sarah whispered. Because of us. Because of me. I picked up the notebook and held it against my chest like armor. This stops tonight, Sarah. I'm filing for emergency custody first thing Monday morning. No judge in the country is going to let this continue after they read what Jake has been going through. Derek's discomfort quickly turned back to arrogance. Good luck with that, buddy. It's your word against ours. Besides, Sarah's a good mother. She just needs to learn how to balance her priorities. Balance. I was incredulous. Leaving a child alone in a car for hours isn't balance. It's neglect. It's abandonment. It's child endangerment. Sarah started pacing around the living room, wringing her hands. Marty, please. We can work this out. I'll do better. I'll make sure Jake comes with us next time. Next time, I stared at her in disbelief. There is no next time, Sarah. This is over. Derek stood up and moved closer to me, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Now listen here, pal. Sarah's building a new life with me. We're not going to let some spoiled brat ruin what we have together. Maybe it's time you accepted that your ex-wife has moved on. The menace in his tone sent warning bells screaming in my head. This wasn't just about negligence anymore. This was about control manipulation and something much darker. I pulled out my cell phone and started dialing my lawyer's emergency number. Even though it was Sunday evening, Marcus had told me to call any time if Jake was ever in danger. What are you doing? Sarah demanded, her voice rising to a near shriek. Calling Marcus. Jake's notebook is evidence of systematic child endangerment. I want an emergency custody hearing scheduled for this week. Derek lunged forward and tried to grab my phone. Like hell you are! I jerked away from him, but he managed to knock the phone out of my hand. It skittered across Sarah's hardwood floor and crashed into the wall. Sarah watched in horror as Derek showed his true colors for the first time. Derek, what are you doing? She asked, backing away from him. I'm protecting what's mine, Derek snarled. Sarah, we've talked about this. If you want to be with me, really be with me, then Jake can't be the center of your universe anymore. I won't play second fiddle to some kid. Sarah's face went white. What are you saying? Derek ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, his mask of charm completely gone now. I'm saying maybe it's time to make some hard choices. I've been patient, Sarah. I've tried to include Jake, tried to be understanding. But this isn't working. Either you choose our relationship, or you choose being tied down by a kid who clearly doesn't appreciate anything you do for him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you seriously asking her to choose between you and her son? Why not? Derek shrugged. Kids are resilient. Jake would be fine with his dad. Sarah deserves a chance at real happiness, not this guilt-ridden motherhood thing that's holding her back. Sarah stared at Derek like she was seeing him for the first time. Derek, I can't just stop being Jake's mother. You're not stopping, Derek said, his voice taking on a manipulative, cajoling tone. You're just reorganizing your priorities. Look, babe, we could travel, see Europe, take that wine-tasting tour through Tuscany we talked about. You could finally write that novel you always dreamed about. But you can't do any of that if you're always worried about some kid's bedtime schedule. The casual way he referred to Jake as some kid made my vision blur with rage, but what came next was even worse. Derek moved closer to Sarah and took her hands in his. I've already talked to my real estate contacts in Denver. There's a fantastic opportunity there. High-end properties, wealthy clients, unlimited potential. We could start fresh. New city, new life, new possibilities. Denver. I felt my world tilt. Sarah, you can't take Jake to Denver. The custody agreement specifically states you can't move more than 50 miles away without court approval. Derek smirked. Who said anything about taking Jake? The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah pulled her hands away from Derek and stared at him in shock. What do you mean? I mean, maybe this is the perfect opportunity for everyone to get what they want. Derek said, his voice smooth as silk. Jake gets to live with his dad full-time, which is clearly what he wants anyway, based on that little journal. You get a fresh start with unlimited possibilities. And I get the woman I fell in love with, not some exhausted single mother who's always putting her kids' needs first. Sarah sank onto the couch like her legs couldn't support her anymore. You want me to give up custody completely? I want you to be free, Derek said, sitting beside her and wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Free to be the amazing, beautiful, talented woman you were before divorce and single motherhood beat you down. You said it yourself, Sarah. You're tired of putting Jake first all the time. I'm offering you a way out. I felt sick to my stomach. This had been Derek's plan all along. Isolate Sarah from Jake, make her feel guilty for prioritizing her child, then swoop in with the promise of a better life without the burden of motherhood. I picked up my damaged phone and tried to turn it on. The screen was cracked, but it was still functional. Derek watched nervously as I started dialing again. Sarah, he said urgently, don't let him call anyone yet. We need to talk about this privately. This is between you and me. But Sarah was staring at the notebook on the floor, her face a mask of growing horror. He wants to run away because of me. My baby wants to disappear because he thinks he's the reason I'm unhappy. Kids are dramatic, Derek said dismissively. He'll get over it. Children adapt faster than adults do. Trust me. Something in Derek's tone must have triggered a memory for Sarah because she suddenly looked up at him with suspicion. How do you know so much about how children adapt? You told me you've never been married, never had kids. Derek's confident facade flickered for just a moment. I just meant you know common knowledge. Kids are resilient. But Sarah was studying his face more carefully now. Derek, have you done this before? Dated single mothers? What kind of question is that? Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. You're being paranoid, babe. That's when his phone started ringing. The ringtone was Wedding March by Mendelssohn. Derek's face went ashen as he scrambled to silence it. Who's calling you? Sarah asked, her voice deadly quiet. Nobody important, probably a sales call. But Sarah was faster than Derek expected. She grabbed his phone before he could stop her and looked at the caller ID. Her face went from pale to chalk white. Wife, she read from the screen. Your wife is calling you. Derek tried to grab the phone back, but Sarah was already answering it. Hello, Sarah said into Derek's phone. This is Sarah. Who is this? I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Sarah's expression told me everything I needed to know. Her face cycled through confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally crushing realization. 5 years, Sarah whispered. You've been married for 5 years and you have 2 children. Derek was frantically shaking his head and mouthing, No, but the damage was already done. Sarah hung up the phone and turned to Derek with murder in her eyes. Your wife just told me you never came home last night. She said you told her you were visiting your sick mother in Cleveland. She's been trying to reach you because your daughter has the flu and was asking for her daddy. Derek's mask of charm completely disintegrated. Sarah, I can explain. It's complicated. My marriage is basically over. We're just staying together for the kids until they're older. You have children? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. You have children of your own? And you've been telling me to abandon mine. I stepped forward, feeling like the pieces of a horrible puzzle were finally clicking into place. Sarah, check his jacket pocket. What? She looked at me in confusion. His jacket, check the inside pocket. Derek tried to block Sarah, but she was already moving toward his navy blazer hanging on the back of a chair. She reached into the inside pocket and pulled out a gold wedding band. You son of a bitch, she breathed, staring at the ring in her palm. You're married, and you've been lying to me for 4 months. Derek's desperation was palpable now. Sarah, please, let me explain. My marriage is a sham. I don't love her, I love you. We can still make this work. Make this work. Sarah's voice was getting louder with each word. You're married, you have children, and you've been trying to convince me to abandon my son. I was trying to free you, Derek shouted back. You were miserable, stuck in this dead-end town with a needy kid and an ex-husband who still controls your life. I was offering you adventure travel excitement. By lying to me every single day, Sarah threw the wedding ring at Derek's chest. By manipulating me into neglecting my child, by making me believe I was crazy for wanting to put Jake first, Derek's whole demeanor shifted from charm to menace in an instant. You know what, Sarah, you're right. You are crazy. You're a mediocre single mother in a nothing town with a whiny brat who documents every little inconvenience in a journal like some kind of victim. You should be grateful I even bothered with you. The cruel words hung in the air like poison. Sarah flinched as if she'd been physically struck, but Derek wasn't done. And you... He turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. You self-righteous piece of trash. You think you're such a great father? Your kid wants to run away rather than deal with the drama you and Sarah create? Maybe you should look in the mirror before pointing fingers. That crossed every line I had. I stepped closer to Derek, my hands clenched into fists. Don't you ever talk about my son again. Derek laughed coldly. What are you going to do about it? Hit me, go ahead. Give me a reason to call the cops and tell them you're a violent man who shouldn't have custody of any child. The manipulation was so calculated, so practiced, that I realized this wasn't Derek's first time orchestrating this kind of psychological warfare. He was a predator, and he'd been hunting vulnerable single mothers. I pulled out my phone again and started dialing 911. Derek's eyes widened in panic. What are you doing now? Calling the police. I want you arrested for child endangerment. And I'm pretty sure your wife would be interested to know where you've been spending your evenings. Derek's panic transformed into something much more dangerous. You call the cops and I promise you'll regret it. I know where you work. I know where Jake goes to school. Accidents happen all the time to people who don't mind their own business. The threat against Jake sent ice water through my veins. Sarah gasped, finally seeing Derek for what he truly was. Are you threatening my son? I asked, my voice deadly calm. Derek's smile was pure evil. I'm just saying that life can be unpredictable. Kids are so vulnerable, aren't they? Anything could happen. That was the moment Derek sealed his fate. He'd just threatened to harm an 8-year-old child. I hit the call button and waited for the dispatcher to answer. 911, what's your emergency? Derek made a desperate lunge for my phone, but this time I was ready. I sidestepped him and kept talking to the dispatcher. I need police at 1507 Maple Grove Lane. I have a man here who's threatening to harm my 8-year-old son. Derek's face went pure white. Sarah, don't let him do this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. But Sarah was backing away from Derek like he was a venomous snake. I heard you threaten Jake. I heard every word. This is insane, Derek shouted. I never threatened anyone. The dispatcher was asking for more details, so I quickly explained the situation, while Derek paced around the living room like a caged animal. Sarah sat frozen on the couch, still clutching Derek's wedding ring. Officers are en route, the dispatcher informed me. Please stay on the line. Derek's panic was escalating by the second. He grabbed Jake's notebook from the floor and tried to rip it apart. This is all lies, kids making everything up. I lunged forward and wrestled the notebook away from him before he could destroy it. Don't touch that, It's evidence of what Derek was practically screaming now. Some kid being overly sensitive, you're all insane. Sarah stood up slowly, her face hardening with resolve. Derek, get out. Get out of my house right now. Sarah, baby, you're being manipulated by your ex. Can't you see that he's jealous that you found someone better? He's trying to destroy what we have. What we have, Sarah's voice was pure venom. What we have is built on lies. You're married, you have children, and you've been systematically trying to turn me against my own son. Derek tried a different approach, his voice becoming pleading and desperate. Okay, yes, I'm married. But I'm separated. We're getting divorced. I just didn't want to overwhelm you with my baggage while we were building our relationship. Separated. I held up his phone. Your wife is calling because your daughter is sick and wants her daddy. That doesn't sound very separated to me. Derek's story kept changing as his desperation grew. The divorce is complicated. There are custody issues. I was trying to protect Sarah from the drama until everything was finalized. Sarah stood up and walked to the front window. The police are here. Derek's entire demeanor shifted again, this time to calculated manipulation. Sarah, listen to me carefully. If you let them arrest me, this will destroy everything. Think about what you're doing. Think about our future together. What future? Sarah turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. You just admitted you're married to someone else. I chose you, Derek insisted. I left my wife for you. I gave up everything for you. You left your wife? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. When Derek realized his mistake immediately, his mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I meant I was planning to leave her for you. Once we figured out the Jake situation, the doorbell rang, followed by a firm knock. Police open up. Derek made one last desperate play. He grabbed Sarah's hands and pulled her close. Sarah, I love you. Whatever they tell you, whatever lies they try to fill your head with, remember that I love you. We can work through this. We can start over. Sarah pulled her hands away and walked to the front door. When she opened it, 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. Good evening, ma'am. We received a call about a disturbance and threats against a minor child. Yes, Sarah said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all evening. The man who made the threats is inside. His name is Derek. The officers entered the living room and immediately assessed the situation. Derek had composed himself and was now playing the role of the reasonable wronged boyfriend. Officers, thank you for coming. This is all a big misunderstanding. My girlfriend's ex-husband is upset that she's moved on and he's trying to cause trouble for us. The older officer, a gray-haired man with sergeant stripes, looked unimpressed. Sir, we need to hear from everyone involved. Can you step outside with my partner while I talk to these folks? Derek looked like he wanted to refuse, but he had no choice. As soon as he was outside, I quickly explained the situation to the sergeant. I showed him Jake's notebook, the photos on Derek's phone, and described the threat Derek had made against my son. This notebook, the sergeant said, flipping through the pages. Your son wrote all of this, every word. He's been documenting months of being left alone in cars while they went to restaurants. Sarah spoke up for the first time since the officers arrived. Sergeant, I need to tell you something. Derek isn't who he said he was. He's married. I just found out tonight. The sergeant's eyebrows rose. Married? Did he tell you he was single? Yes. For 4 months he's been lying to me about everything. And I just realized he's been manipulating me into neglecting my son. The sergeant's radio crackled and I heard the younger officer's voice. Sarge, you need to hear this. Subject's vehicle has multiple cell phones in it, women's clothing that doesn't match our complainant, and what appears to be surveillance photos. Surveillance photos. The sergeant looked puzzled. Of who? The radio crackled again. Looks like photos of different women with children, and there are hotel receipts from 3 different cities. Sarah and I exchanged horrified looks. Derek wasn't just a cheater. He was running some kind of organized operation. I'll be right out, the sergeant said into his radio. He turned to us. I need you both to stay here while we search his vehicle more thoroughly. Through the front window, I could see Derek arguing animatedly with the younger officer. His smooth charm was completely gone, replaced by desperate aggression. Sarah sank onto the couch, her face in her hands. Marty, what have I done? What has he done to Jake? Sarah, this isn't your fault. Derek is a manipulator. He targeted you because you were vulnerable after our divorce. But I chose him over Jake, she sobbed. I actually considered giving up custody. What kind of mother does that make me? Before I could answer, the sergeant returned with a grim expression. Folks, we've got a problem. The subject's real name appears to be Douglas Brennan, not Derek Brennan. He's got identification under multiple names, and we found what looks like detailed profiles of several different women. Sarah looked up sharply. Profiles? Personal information, photos of you and your son, details about your work schedule, your ex-husband's job, your son's school. This looks like he's been conducting surveillance on your entire family. My blood turned to ice. Derek hadn't just been dating Sarah, he'd been studying us. Learning our routines, our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses. There's more, the sergeant continued. We ran his real name through the system. Douglas Brennan has outstanding warrants in Tennessee and Georgia for fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. Sarah made a choking sound. Child endangerment. Other children. Similar pattern. He targets recently divorced mothers, isolates them from their children, then systematically drains their resources. In Tennessee, he convinced a woman to liquidate her savings for a business opportunity that didn't exist. In Georgia, he talked a mother into signing temporary custody of her children to their father while he took her on an extended romantic vacation that turned into abandonment. I felt sick to my stomach. Derek had been playing a long game and we'd walked right into his trap. The sergeant's radio crackled again. Sarge, we've got another issue. Subject was asking the child questions about the father's work schedule and home security. Looks like he was planning something more than just relationship fraud. What do you mean? I asked, though I was already afraid of the answer. The younger officer appeared in the doorway. Sir, we found handwritten notes in his car about your daily routine. What time you leave for work when you get home, whether you have a security system. There are also Google Map printouts of your neighborhood with your house circled. Sarah gasped. He was planning to rob you. Or worse, the sergeant said grimly. Mr. Brennan, based on what we found here tonight, it looks like your son may have been targeted for kidnapping. The surveillance notes include details about the child's school schedule and after-school activities. The room started spinning. Derek hadn't just been neglecting Jake during those restaurant visits. He'd been pumping him for information, learning everything he could about our family's routines and vulnerabilities. Where is he now? I demanded. In custody, the sergeant assured me. He's not going anywhere. But I need you both to come to the station tomorrow to give detailed statements. And sir, you'll want to contact your son's school and anywhere else he spends time. We're treating this as a potential kidnapping conspiracy. Sarah was sobbing openly now. Jake tried to tell me something was wrong. He kept asking why Derek asked so many questions. I thought Derek was just trying to get to know him better. Ma'am, the sergeant said gently, children often have better instincts about danger than adults do. Your son was documenting everything because he sensed something was wrong, even if he couldn't articulate exactly what it was. I thought about Jake's notebook, his careful documentation of times and places. My 8-year-old son had been gathering evidence against a potential kidnapper without even realizing it. Sergeant, I said, there's something else you need to know. Jake has been documenting everything in that notebook for months. But the last entry says he wants to run away because he thinks he's the reason his parents got divorced. The sergeant's expression softened. That child has been through hell, hasn't he? Sarah looked up at me with devastation in her eyes. Marty, what if Derek had succeeded? What if he had taken Jake? I couldn't even think about that possibility without feeling physically ill. He didn't succeed, Sarah. Jake's safe. That's what matters now. But even as I said the words, I realized how close we'd come to losing everything. If Jake hadn't been brave enough to tell me about being left in the car, if I hadn't found his notebook, if Derek's wife hadn't called at exactly the right moment, This story could have had a very different ending. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove Jake to the police station. He clutched my hand tightly as we walked through the doors, his Pokemon notebook tucked safely in my jacket pocket. Sarah met us there looking like she hadn't slept all night. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she couldn't seem to look directly at Jake. Detective Lisa Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, had been assigned to the case. She led us to a comfortable interview room with child-friendly decorations and a box of toys in the corner. Jake. Detective Rodriguez said, kneeling to his eye level, "I want you to know that you're very brave. The notebook you kept has helped us catch a bad man who was trying to hurt families." Jake looked confused. "Derek's a bad man, but he bought Mom flowers. Sometimes bad people do nice things to trick us," the detective explained gently. "But you were smart to write down what happened to you. That notebook is going to help protect other children." As Detective Rodriguez interviewed Jake, more pieces of Derek's operation came to light. Through his innocent 8-year-old perspective, Jake revealed details that painted a terrifying picture of Derek's methodical planning. "He asked me lots of questions," Jake told the detective. "Like what time Dad goes to work and if we have a dog and where I keep my bike. He said he was just trying to be my friend, but it felt weird." Detective Rodriguez showed Jake some photos on her tablet. "Jake, have you seen any of these women before?" Jake studied the screen carefully, then pointed to one image. "That's the lady from the grocery store. Derek talked to her for a really long time while Mom was buying groceries. He said she looked sad and needed cheering up." My stomach dropped. Derek had been recruiting victims while Sarah watched, using her presence to seem trustworthy and non-threatening. "Did Derek talk to any other ladies when you were with him?" the detective asked. Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Lots. He was really good at making sad moms smile. There was the lady at the park whose little girl was crying, and the lady at Target who looked tired. Derek said he had a gift for helping people feel better." Sarah made a strangled noise. "He was hunting right in front of us, using Jake as bait to seem like a family man." Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly. "It's a common tactic. Predators often use children to gain access to potential victims and to lower their guard." The interview continued for another hour, revealing the full scope of Derek's surveillance operation. He'd been gathering information not just about our family, but about several other families in town. Jake innocently described seeing Derek take pictures of houses, writing down license plate numbers, and asking seemingly casual questions about neighbors and friends. "Jake," I said when the interview was over, "you did nothing wrong. Do you understand that everything that happened was Derek's fault, not yours?" Jake looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. "Dad, are you and Mom going to get back together now that Derek's gone?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. Sarah and I exchanged glances over Jake's head. "Buddy," I said carefully, "Mom and I are divorced because we couldn't make our marriage work. That had nothing to do with you. Adults sometimes stop loving each other as husband and wife. But we both love you more than anything in the world. That will never change." "But I heard Mom say she might move to Denver," Jake whispered. "Without me." Sarah immediately knelt beside Jake and took his hands. "Jake, I was confused and scared and making terrible decisions. But I want you to know something very important. I will never ever leave you. You are the most important thing in my life, and I'm sorry I forgot that for a while. Promise." Jake's voice was so small and vulnerable that it broke my heart. "I promise," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "I promise I will never put anyone ahead of you again." After we left the police station, Detective Rodriguez called to update us on the investigation. Douglas Brennan, aka Derek, was being held without bond on multiple charges, including child endangerment, stalking fraud, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Federal agents were now involved because of his pattern of crimes across state lines. "We've identified at least 6 other victims," Detective Rodriguez told me. 3 in Tennessee, 2 in Georgia, and 1 in Alabama. The pattern is always the same. He targets recently divorced mothers, usually with young children, and slowly isolates them from their support systems. How does he find them? I asked. Divorce records are public information. He also frequents places where single mothers gather, parks, school events, grocery stores, family restaurants. He's very good at identifying vulnerable women and approaching them at exactly the right moment. The detective's next words chilled me to the bone. Mr. Thompson, based on the evidence we've found, we believe Derek was planning to kidnap Jake this week. He had detailed maps of your neighborhood, photos of your house, and a timeline of your daily routines. There were also notes about a rental truck and storage unit he'd arranged outside the city. I had to sit down. The room was spinning around me. He was going to take Jake. We think so. And based on his pattern with other victims, he would have used Jake's disappearance to manipulate Sarah into leaving town with him. He's done similar things before. Manufacture a crisis, then swoop in as the rescuer with a solution that benefits him. What about his wife? Sarah asked. Is she involved? No, she's another victim. She had no idea about any of this. Turns out Derek told her he was traveling for work. She thought he was trying to expand his real estate business to new markets. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. How many families has he destroyed? More than we'll probably ever know, Detective Rodriguez said sadly. But the good news is that Jake's notebook and your quick action have ended his operation permanently. The evidence we've gathered will put him away for decades. That evening, Jake and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset. He was drawing pictures in a new notebook, this one filled with happy memories instead of painful documentation. Dad, he said without looking up from his drawing, I'm glad Derek's gone. Me too, buddy, me too. But I feel bad for Mom. She looks really sad. I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults make mistakes because they're hurting inside. Mom made some bad choices, but she loves you very much. She's just figuring out how to be the mom you deserve. Jake nodded solemnly, then showed me his drawing. It was a picture of the three of us at his school carnival last month before Derek had entered our lives. We were all smiling and holding cotton candy. I drew this so I could remember when we were happy, and he said, even though you and Mom aren't married anymore, we had fun that day. We did have fun, I agreed. And we can have fun again. It might be different than before, but we're still a family. Just a different kind of family. Dad, yeah, I'm sorry I wanted to run away. I thought I was causing all the problems. I set down his notebook and pulled him into a hug. Jake, you never caused any problems. Sometimes adults have troubles that have nothing to do with kids. You are perfect exactly the way you are, and both Mom and I are lucky to have you. He hugged me back tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy. More than all the stars in the sky. 3 weeks later, we were back in court for Derek's preliminary hearing. The courtroom was packed with victims from multiple states, all women who'd been manipulated and exploited by Douglas Brennan's carefully orchestrated schemes. I listened in horror as prosecutor Jennifer Walsh detailed the full scope of his crimes. In Tennessee, he'd convinced a woman named Amanda to liquidate her children's college funds for a fake investment opportunity. In Georgia, he'd talked a single mother named Lisa into signing temporary custody papers so they could take a romantic cruise together. Instead, he'd abandoned her in Miami with no money, no identification, and no way to get home to her children. Your Honor, Prosecutor Walsh said the defendant's pattern is clear and consistent. He identifies vulnerable single mothers through public divorce records, studies their routines and vulnerabilities, then systematically isolates them from their children and support systems. His ultimate goal is financial exploitation, but he's willing to use psychological manipulation and child endangerment to achieve it. Derek's court-appointed lawyer tried to paint him as a misunderstood man caught up in complicated relationships, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jake's notebook was entered as Exhibit A, and listening to the prosecutor read excerpts aloud made me want to strangle Derek with my bare hands. March 22nd. They went to a place with a big cow statue outside. 1 hour and 55 minutes. I had to pee so bad, but Derek said if I got out of the car, he would never take me anywhere again. I had an accident. Mom was mad about the car seat. Sarah, who was sitting in the row behind me, made a choking sound. She'd been attending therapy 3 times a week trying to understand how she'd been so thoroughly manipulated. The most damning evidence came from Derek's own cell phone. Federal agents had recovered hundreds of photos documenting his surveillance activities. Photos of houses, license plates, children playing in yards, women shopping alone. He'd been treating single mothers like prey, studying their habits and weaknesses with the cold calculation of a predator. The defendant kept detailed profiles of potential victims. Prosecutor Walsh continued. Sarah Thompson's profile included her work schedule, her financial vulnerabilities following her divorce, her guilt about her failed marriage, and detailed information about her son's routines and activities. He approached this relationship like a military operation with strategies for isolating her from her support system and ultimately gaining control of her life. When it came time for victim impact statements, Sarah surprised everyone by asking to speak. She walked to the podium on shaky legs, clutching a piece of paper. "Your Honor," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to tell you about my son Jake. He's 8 years old. He loves Pokemon and building Lego castles, and helping me make pancakes on Sunday mornings. For 4 months, I let a stranger convince me that my child was the reason I was unhappy. I let him manipulate me into believing that being a good mother was holding me back from living my best life." Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Douglas Brennan didn't just lie to me about who he was. He systematically destroyed my relationship with my son. He convinced me to prioritize his needs over my child's basic welfare. He made me believe that leaving Jake alone and scared was teaching him independence. He almost convinced me to give up custody entirely so we could start a new life together." She looked directly at Derek, who was refusing to make eye contact. "But the worst part is that my son blamed himself. My beautiful, innocent 8-year-old boy thought he was the reason his parents got divorced. He was planning to run away because he thought disappearing would make everyone happier. That's what your manipulation did to a child who never did anything wrong except need his mother's love and protection." Sarah's voice broke, but she kept going. "Jake kept a notebook documenting every time you forced him to wait alone in a car while we ate dinner. Not because he wanted to get us in trouble, but because he needed some way to make sense of what was happening to him. He was 8 years old and he was gathering evidence of his own abandonment because he knew something was terribly wrong." The courtroom was completely silent except for the sound of people crying. "Your Honor, I failed my son in ways that will take years to repair. But I want Douglas Brennan to understand that his actions didn't just hurt me. They traumatized an innocent child who trusted the adults in his life to protect him. Jake is in therapy now, learning that he's not responsible for adult problems. I'm in therapy too, learning how to be the mother he deserves. We're both healing, but the scars from those 4 months will last forever." Sarah folded her paper and looked at Derek one more time. "I hope you get the maximum sentence. Not for what you did to me, but for what you did to my son and all the other children whose lives you've destroyed." The judge thanked Sarah and called for a brief recess. In the hallway, I found her sobbing against the wall. "Sarah," I said gently, "that was incredibly brave." "I should have protected him," she whispered. "I should have seen what Derek was doing. I should have trusted my instincts when Jake seemed unhappy." "Derek is a professional manipulator," I reminded her. "He's been doing this for years. You weren't stupid or weak. You were vulnerable, and he exploited that. But Jake paid the price for my vulnerability. My baby boy wanted to disappear because of choices I made." Before I could respond, Jake appeared at my side. He'd been staying with my mother during the hearing, but she'd brought him to the courthouse when it ran longer than expected. "Mom," Jake said hesitantly, "are you okay?" Sarah knelt down and pulled him into a fierce hug. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm just sad about the choices I made that hurt you." Jake hugged her back, then pulled away to look at her face. "Mom, you don't have to be sad anymore. Derek's gone, and now we can be a family again. A different family, but still a family." "When did you get so wise?" Sarah asked, smoothing his hair. "Dad says kids sometimes understand things better than grown-ups do." Jake said matter-of-factly. "And I understand that Derek was a bad man who tricked you. But you're my mom, and I love you, even when you make mistakes." Sarah started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge delivered his ruling. Douglas Brennan was ordered to stand trial on all charges and was denied bond. The evidence was so overwhelming that his lawyer immediately began discussing a plea bargain. "Mr. Brennan," Judge Martinez said sternly, "you have caused immeasurable harm to multiple families across multiple states. You have exploited the vulnerability of divorced women and endangered the welfare of innocent children. The court finds the evidence of your systematic predatory behavior to be compelling and disturbing." Derek finally spoke, his voice lacking any of the charm he'd used to manipulate Sarah. "Your Honor, I never intended to hurt anyone. These relationships just became complicated." Complicated? The judge's voice was ice cold. "Mr. Brennan, leaving an 8-year-old child alone in a car for hours while you enjoyed expensive dinners is not complicated. It's child endangerment. Surveilling families and planning kidnapping scenarios is not complicated. It's criminal conspiracy." The judge set a trial date for 6 months out, but Prosecutor Walsh was confident Derek would accept a plea deal to avoid the possibility of life in prison. As we left the courthouse, Jake took both Sarah's hand and mine. "Dad, Mom, can we go get ice cream, all 3 of us together?" Sarah and I looked at each other over his head. We weren't getting back together romantically, but maybe we could learn to be the co-parents Jake deserved. "I think that sounds perfect," Sarah said, squeezing Jake's hand. "Chocolate chip cookie dough for everyone," I suggested. "With extra sprinkles," Jake added seriously. For the first time in months, the 3 of us laughed together. It wasn't the family we used to be, but it was the family we were learning to become. 6 months later, Douglas Brennan accepted a plea bargain that sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The sentence took into account his crimes across multiple states and his pattern of targeting families with young children. Detective Rodriguez called to give us the news on a sunny Saturday morning in October. Jake was in our backyard raking leaves into piles so he could jump in them, something that had become our new weekend tradition. 15 years, I repeated into the phone. "That's it?" "It's a good sentence for a first conviction," Detective Rodriguez assured me. "And here's the best part. He'll be required to pay restitution to all his victims, and he's been placed on a registry that will monitor him for the rest of his life. If he ever attempts to contact any dating websites or approaches single mothers when he's released, he'll go straight back to prison." After I hung up, I walked outside to tell Jake the news. He was buried up to his neck in a pile of orange and red leaves, grinning from ear to ear. "Hey, buddy, Derek's going to prison for a very long time. He won't be able to hurt any more families." Jake sat up, leaves falling from his hair. "Good. Maybe now other kids won't have to wait in cars while their moms eat dinner with bad men." The simple way he processed justice always amazed me. In Jake's world, bad people should face consequences so they couldn't hurt others. It was that straightforward. Sarah arrived that afternoon for her regular Saturday visit. Over the past 6 months, we'd worked out a new custody arrangement that put Jake's needs first. Instead of overnight visits, Sarah came to our house every Tuesday and Thursday evening for dinner and homework help, plus Saturday afternoons for activities. It wasn't traditional, but it was working. "How's therapy going?" I asked as we watched Jake build a fort out of cardboard boxes. "Better," Sarah said. "Dr. Martinez says I'm making real progress, understanding how Derek manipulated my insecurities about the divorce. I spent so long feeling guilty about our marriage failing that I was easy prey for someone who promised to make me feel valuable again." Sarah had been working with a therapist who specialized in helping victims of emotional manipulation. She'd learned that Derek's approach was textbook predatory behavior, designed to exploit the exact vulnerabilities that come with divorce and single parenthood. "What I still can't understand is how I didn't see what he was doing to Jake," Sarah continued. "The signs were all there. Derek was very good at what he did," I reminded her. He'd been perfecting his technique for years. But Jake knew something was wrong. Even at 8 years old, he knew. I nodded toward our son, who was now decorating his cardboard fort with crayon drawings of superheroes. Kids have good instincts about people. Maybe because they haven't learned to ignore their gut feelings yet. Sarah smiled sadly. Jake's therapist says he's doing remarkably well considering everything he went through. She says his resilience is extraordinary. Dr. Emily Chen, Jake's child psychologist, had been working with him weekly since the incident. She'd helped him understand that adults sometimes make mistakes, that divorce isn't caused by children's behavior, and that documenting his experiences in the notebook had been incredibly brave and smart. Jake's notebook saved other children from going through what he went through, Dr. Chen had told us during a family session. He should be proud that his courage helped stop a bad man from hurting more families. Jake had taken this responsibility seriously. He'd asked Dr. Chen to give copies of his notebook to other kids whose parents had been tricked by Douglas Brennan so they would know they weren't alone. That evening, the three of us made dinner together. Jake stood on a step stool at the counter, carefully measuring ingredients for his famous spaghetti sauce. Sarah chopped vegetables while I boiled pasta. It felt natural and peaceful in a way our family dinners never had when we were married. "Dad, can I tell you something?" Jake said as we sat down to eat. "Always, buddy. I used to think it was my fault that you and Mom got divorced." But Dr. Chen helped me understand that grown-ups have problems that kids don't cause. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Jake, I'm so sorry you ever thought that. The divorce happened because Dad and I couldn't figure out how to be happy together as husband and wife. But we both love you more than anything." "I know that now," Jake said matter-of-factly. "And I also know that Derek was trying to trick Mom into not loving me anymore. But he couldn't do it because mothers can't stop loving their children." "That's right," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Nothing in the world could ever make me stop loving you." Jake nodded seriously, then brightened up. "And now Derek's in prison, so he can't trick any more moms." After dinner, Jake asked if he could show Sarah something in his room. I followed them upstairs, curious about what he wanted to share. On his desk was a new notebook, bright blue with a rocket ship on the cover. But instead of documenting painful experiences, this one was filled with happy memories. Pictures he'd drawn of family game nights, stories about learning to ride his bike without training wheels, detailed descriptions of birthday parties and holidays. "I decided to keep writing in notebooks," Jake explained to Sarah. "But now I write about good things instead of scary things. Dr. Chen says it's important to remember the happy times too." Sarah flipped through the pages, tears streaming down her cheeks. Every entry was positive and hopeful. Jake had written about the day Sarah apologized for making bad choices. He'd documented their first family therapy session, describing how proud he felt when the doctor said he was brave. He'd even written about Derek going to prison, expressing relief that other children would be safe. "This is beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah said, hugging him tightly. "I love that you're writing about all our good memories now." "Want to see my favorite page?" Jake asked, flipping to an entry from last month. October 3rd. Mom, Dad, and I went to the pumpkin patch together. We weren't fighting or being sad. Mom taught me how to pick the best pumpkin by knocking on it to hear if it sounds hollow. Dad showed me how to guess the weight by lifting it. Then we all carved jack-o'-lanterns together on Dad's back porch. Mom made her silly, scared face, and Dad made his traditional grumpy face, and I made a happy face with a big smile. We put them all on the front steps together, and they looked like a family of pumpkins. I think our real family looks like that too now. Different faces, but all together and glowing. Sarah was crying so hard she could barely speak. "Jake, that's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever written." "Dr. Chen says writing helps me process my feelings," Jake said proudly. "And I have lots of good feelings now." As the evening wound down, Sarah helped Jake with his math homework, while I cleaned the kitchen. Through the window, I could see them at the dining room table, heads bent together over his workbook. Sarah was patiently explaining long division, while Jake drew little cartoon characters in the margins. This was what our family looked like now. Not perfect, not traditional, but functional and loving. We'd all learned something valuable from our ordeal with Derek. I'd learned that protecting my son meant staying vigilant and trusting my instincts even when it created conflict. Sarah had learned that her worth as a person didn't depend on having a romantic partner, and that being a good mother was the most important job she'd ever have. And Jake had learned that adults make mistakes sometimes, but that doesn't mean children are responsible for fixing those mistakes. When it was time for Sarah to leave, Jake hugged her goodbye at the front door. "I love you, Mom. Even when you made bad choices, I never stopped loving you." "I love you too, baby, more than all the stars in the sky." "That's what Dad always says," Jake laughed. "Because it's true," Sarah and I said in unison, then smiled at each other. After Sarah left, Jake and I settled in for our Saturday night movie tradition. This week he'd chosen The Incredibles, a movie about a family of superheroes who had to work together to defeat a villain. "Dad," Jake said as the opening credits rolled. "Yeah, buddy. Do you think we're like superheroes because we caught a bad guy?" I thought about his question seriously. "I think you're like a superhero because you were brave enough to tell me what was happening, even when it was scary. And you helped protect other kids by writing everything down in your notebook." Jake snuggled closer to me on the couch. "What's your superhero power, Dad?" "I think my power is loving you so much that I'll always fight to protect you no matter what. And Mom's power is learning how to say sorry and make better choices." "That's exactly right. Mom's power is growing stronger and wiser." Jake was quiet for a few minutes watching the movie. Then he said, "I think our family's superhero power is that we stick together even when things get hard." I kissed the top of his head, overwhelmed with pride and love for this remarkable little boy who'd shown more courage and wisdom than most adults. "I think you're absolutely right, buddy." As the movie played, I reflected on how much we'd all grown over the past year. Jake had learned to trust his instincts and speak up when something felt wrong. Sarah had learned to recognize manipulation and prioritize her child's well-being above her own insecurities. And I'd learned that sometimes protecting the people you love means taking action even when it's uncomfortable or creates conflict. Derek's attempt to destroy our family had actually made us stronger. We'd faced the worst-case scenario and come through it together. Jake was thriving in school, making friends, and sleeping peacefully through the night without nightmares. Sarah was building a new life based on her own goals and values, not someone else's manipulation. And I'd gained a deeper appreciation for the precious trust that comes with being a parent. The most important lesson came from Jake himself. Throughout his ordeal, he'd maintained his fundamental goodness and faith in family love. Even when he thought about running away, it was because he wanted to make his parents happy. Even when he was scared and confused, he kept documenting what happened because some part of him knew the truth mattered. Children see the world with clarity that adults often lose. Jake knew Derek was dangerous before any of us recognized the signs. He trusted his instincts even when he couldn't explain why something felt wrong. And when the crisis was over, he forgave the adults who'd failed to protect him and focused on building new happy memories. As parents, our job isn't to be perfect. It's to love our children unconditionally, learn from our mistakes, and teach them that they're valuable and worthy of protection. Sometimes that means admitting we've made terrible choices. Sometimes it means confronting uncomfortable truths about people we trusted. And sometimes it means having the courage to take action when someone threatens our child's safety. Douglas Brennan targeted our family because he thought we were vulnerable and easy to manipulate. What he didn't understand was that our love for Jake made us stronger than he anticipated. Sarah found the strength to choose her son over a false promise of happiness. I found the courage to confront a dangerous situation head-on. And Jake found his voice to speak up about his experiences. That love, that fierce protection of an innocent child turned out to be our greatest strength. It's what saved our family and helped us build something better from the broken pieces. Now, watching my son laugh at the movie while snuggled safely beside me, I know we're exactly where we're supposed to be. Not the family we once were, but the family we were meant to become. Have you ever had to choose between what seemed easy and what was right when it came to protecting someone you love? Sometimes the most important decisions we make happen in split seconds when our instincts tell us something is wrong, and we have to decide whether to trust that feeling or ignore it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about families overcoming challenges together. Share this with someone who needs to remember that love and courage can triumph over manipulation and fear. Thank you for listening, and remember that protecting the people we love sometimes requires us to be braver than we ever thought possible. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.